Hello there friends, we live in great times. If you remember, March 3rd was meant to be the Final Fantasy VII Remake release date before it was delayed, but at the very least, a day earlier than March 3rd, March 2nd, we get a demo for Final Fantasy VII Remake, which, it's so strange to actually play this game. This is a real game that you can play for about an hour on the PlayStation Store. You can download a whole demo. It's wonderful. It's free. It's real. It's actually a real game. And I figured I'd give you my impressions of the demo, how I felt about it, how it makes me feel about the final game, and whether or not I'm excited for it. I am excited for it. If you'd rather not hear me talk about the demo and just watch the demo, you'd go play the demo yourself. But if you'd rather watch it, I'll leave a link in the description to my playthrough of the demo so you can watch me stumble through stuff like an idiot. Like the idiot I truly am, as opposed to anything else. It's truly baffling that this game is real, because I went back and forth on whether or not I actually wanted this game. There's periods where like, I don't need a Final Fantasy VII Remake, and now after playing the demo I'm like, yeah, I was wrong. I need a Final Fantasy VII Remake, and it's real good. I think that's my first takeaway. It is real good. It feels very, very nice. It feels exactly like the action remake of Final Fantasy VII you'd expect, and that sounds obvious, but based on the tumultuous development history of this game, that wasn't a guarantee going in. But if you go back and play the original Final Fantasy VII and like try and picture it in your head, try and like blow it up into a full cinematic action game, it's like, this is what that is. Because the demo consists of the opening bombing mission, which beat for beat is more or less the same as the original game. So everything you'll see in that demo you will have played in the original game, unless you have not played the original, in which it will all be new. So it kind of it lends itself very well to direct comparison to that original game, because, well, it's beat for beat more or less the same. The combat's different, it looks an awful lot nicer, and it has spoken dialogue and new music, but the actual content is more or less the same, which is kind of cool because you can then make direct comparisons. So it starts, panning out. You see Aeris. They introduce some of the Sephiroth music cues over Aeris, and that's so cool. And it's the kind of thing that if you don't play the original, you won't really understand until later in the game. But when you hear like a little bit of One Wing Angel over the classic intro bombing theme, it's like, ooh, foreshadowing. Because they do introduce, even in this very first mission, they introduce Sephiroth, not physically, but in terms of there's cues, there's music cues, there's little feathers that tell you Sephiroth is here, and he's kind of blooming over this entire experience. And that's not the only thing they kind of hint toward. They make certain elements of the plot that I won't go into because it's obviously spoilery later in the game, but certain elements of the plot surrounding Cloud a little more obvious, a little more on the nose, a little more, like, I suppose it's not on the nose if you haven't played the game and you don't know actually where it's going, but if you played the original Final Fantasy and you play this demo, you'll realize that there are little beats in there that foreshadow stuff that's to come a lot more than the original game did. The original game kind of, a little more, there was some of it in there, but it was a little more obtuse and a little less obvious, whereas here it's just like, oh, that's what they're setting up there. As again, I don't want to spoil it. It's a weird territory that you don't want to spoil a game originally released in 1997, but the game's out next month. You don't want to spoil it. If you played Final Fantasy 15, if you played Kingdom Hearts, you'll get a good feel of the combat. It's not the same, but it's the kind of same genre of action combat. I think it does a really nice job of melding the original kind of layout, the original battle system on top of an action game, because it's an action game first and foremost. You switch between Cloud and Barret. Cloud's a swordsman, Barret attacks from range. Both have magic attacks, both build up ATB bars to use special attacks. It's a simple, I think, logical extension of that Final Fantasy VII battle system, with materia, with weapons, with attacks, with limit breaks, all still in there, but translated to a very nice feeling action game. It does feel very nice. Combat is fluid, Cloud bounces all over the place attacking things. I'm interested to see how that extends long term, and whether that combat system remains, well, I was gonna say remains interesting, but the original game was picking options from frickin' menus, so I can't really give out if it doesn't dramatically expand, but it feels like it will. It feels like there's going to be a lot of depth and room to kind of customize your own personal playstyle inside that battle system. So I'm excited to see how that plays out, but it feels real nice. It does feel real nice. It feels as good as well, maybe not as good as Kingdom Hearts, because Kingdom Hearts is meant to be faster, but it has the weight you'd expect of Cloud. Barret has like the gunshots you'd expect of Barret. The characters feel extremely different, so when you're using them, one applies to one situation, the other applies to the other. They do a good job of introducing enemies that make you use Barret or make you use Cloud, or boss fights. I'll get into the boss fight in a second, but the boss fight does the same thing. I assume the rest of the roster, the rest of the character roster, will hopefully feel as like different and varied and unique, so that, you know, when you bring Vincent or when you bring Sid into battle, assuming they're in the game, because obviously I don't think they'll be in part 1 unless they somehow shoehorn them in there, but I'd imagine those characters won't be introduced until the second part of this game. But when those characters are introduced, hopefully they have the same kind of unique feel to them as Cloud and Barret do in that demo. Most of like the opening beats are just like Cloud's a gruff mercenary, Barret's angry at the world, Jessie very horny for Cloud, hornier for Cloud than the original game. Like, I think her horniness for Cloud was a little more subtle in the original game. She kind of just wanted to impress him, whereas here she's very horny for Cloud, which, you know, can't blame her. Some of the like Barret voice acting in the like cutscenes was a little, I don't know, on the nose. It was a little emotionally forceful for the introduction of the game, but I did like some of the banter while in battle when you're fighting the Scorpion. He was like, don't get shoot by the tail laser, you'll die. They were mocking each other. Or they gave you the choice of, when you plant the bomb, they gave you the choice of how long you wanted to have to escape, and I picked the longer option, just because I have no idea how tightly that's timed. It's a demo, I don't want to die. And I think the game mocks you for it. It's like, oh, that's a ton of time. Fine. And that kind of stuff. I'm fully on board with that stuff, that kind of charm. More of that in the game, ideally. The score is absolutely fantastic. It does such a good job of interjecting the kind of the musical themes of the original Final Fantasy, because it's entirely redone score by Nobuo Uematsu. So it still has all the spirit of the original score. It's just 2020, so it's much more dynamic music. It's not limited to the sound of the PlayStation 1, even though that original score, that original soundtrack, fantastic. As you hear like the introduction theme or the reactor theme or the fighting music, or the way they introduce elements of the main theme into the bombing mission theme, which is like so good. Listen, if this game ends up being terrible, which I don't think it will be based on me playing this, but if it does end up being terrible, at the very least, we'll get an absolutely killer remix of that score. We will always have that going for us. The environmental themes are still there, thank God, though that's what the game's about. So if they took that out, I'd be like, oh, okay. And as I said, from a content perspective, this is more or less, there's some like very mild dodge some lasers sections that weren't in the original game, but other than that, it's pretty beat for beat the original game. Like, it's hard to get a judge of how like the environments will feel, because like you're in a Mako reactor, so it's going to be just long corridors of steel rooms that don't look particularly interesting or impressive. So like, you can't judge the game on that yet. I don't know what the variety will be like. I don't know what kind of interesting environments they will build, so this game has a kind of like wide visual variety, especially it's an action game, so you'll be walking through those interiors a little more than you would in the original game, and you just have to run through them and you're dragged off to a combat screen. But it's a Mako reactor, so everything looked like a Mako reactor, and I'm hopeful that in the final game those environments you're running through have a ton of interesting visual variety. And then we wrapped up with a big boss fight against Scorpion, and the boss fights, like, they're really like dynamic and multi-layered and multi-phased, and you have to do certain objectives. You for the Scorpion, obviously he had his classic tail laser, where the dialogue is clear this time as to whether or not you should avoid it. He also had like a shield at one stage where you had to get behind him and disable the shield, or he ran away from you and hid on the wall so that you could only shoot him with Barret. So it is multi-phase, and as I said, it encourages you to switch between Cloud and switch between Barret, which you can do at any time without any penalty, so that, you know, you build up your ATB, you use your attacks, if you need to attack from range, you go to Barret, if you need to get up close, you go to Cloud. I hope some of those boss fights don't become like really long slogs, but this one is really cool. This is really interesting, that it's not just, you know, attack until you win. There's different phases, there's different kind of objectives, there's different stages. It has different attack patterns and different behavior. So it feels like they're putting a lot of effort into making those boss fights feel big and meaningful and encourage different character use, which is about all you can ask for those boss fights. And the boss music's great, because the score in this game if I didn't say it already, which I did. It's tremendous. God, I love the Final Fantasy VII soundtrack. And hearing it remixed in this kind of setting. So good. So good. So I'm extremely hopeful. As I said, there was a period where I was like, I don't think we need a Final Fantasy VII remake. And now I'm like, it's a month away. The game's out on April 10th. And I really desperately want it because I think, based on this demo, it's real darn good. I'm very excited. It's a very good sign that having played the game for about 40-50 minutes, I'm more excited for it than I was beforehand. So like actually playing it, it's a real video game. You can play it. Final Fantasy VII Remake's a real video game that's playable. And getting my hands in it, I'm like, oh, I just want this. I still have some apprehensions about the format in which they're releasing it in chapters, and whether or not the final release of Chapter 1 will justify a full game, but nonetheless, what I played at that demo rules. That game looks great. As I said, I'll put just the gameplay of my demo playthrough in the description if you just want to watch that instead of hearing me ramble. On your left, my review of Final Fantasy VIII. On your right, why the Black Mage Village in Final Fantasy IX absolutely rules. My favourite town. I love it. Thanks for watching.